and then take the reverse, and that turns often to be the direction of the day. And if I'm wrong, I've stopped and reversed. So I don't know if I've gone off in loads of different directions
Let
now.
me violate the rules and just simply say what you just said I was going to say, and that is where the RL10 turns at the bottom and where the RL10 turns at the top, that's the width of your current channel statistically. And that has to be 4 MMRB in order to think about trading the channel. Because you got to give it 1 MMRB, and then you're going to give back 1 MMRB because of reasons. So that leaves you 2 in the middle to justify taking the risk of 1.
Yep.
So if you have 4 MMRBs, and if the MMRB is 1/10 of the range stat, you now have mathematical precision to say the channel trade, I must have reasons to believe that the channel is 40% of the range stat, which is about 1.5 frog boxes in our old school. So look how far we've come. We used to wait for a frog box and then enter, and now we're entering on a third of a frog box, aiming for 2 MMRBs in the middle that we want to capture, knowing that we're going to give 1 on the other end. So as you take a look at the peaks and bellies of the RL10 as it starts to compress, if it's at least 4 boxes wide, you can be a serious person and trading inside that from point to point, knowing that if it does break through this time, then yee-hoo, we're on to an enthusiastic breakout. A new channel is being formed because it didn't get contained.
Yep.
But if it's less than that, now you're thinking about, well, what I've got is an SQC. Is it narrow enough to trade it as a bracket breakout? No, it's still choppy. But when it gets narrowed down to about 2 MMRBs, now you can play the breakout from that in either direction. That's where that'll line up with Z3Ps and all that stuff too. So there is a really good discussion of that exact pattern from this weekend's podcast, where we described that in one of the sniper trades of the day. I think it was Friday, where we realized that the trades we were taking early in the day was based on a 4 MMRB wide channel, and then the COTA 2 that came out of that, and then the thing went running, and then that was, I think, it was probably the CLF for U.S. Steel trade. I'm going to extract it out and put it in there. But I just want to say that little moment of clarity for me this weekend really was staggering. It was as important to me as the moment when I drew that control chart that was part of today's exercise, which I drew 5 or 6 years ago. I mean, that's one of the most important ones I've ever drawn. So that's what I want to say. I want you to recognize that the RL10, its turning point is always a sharp point because of math. It doesn't kind of ooze around like the dragon does. That RL10 point to point is the width of that is the statistical width of the channel, because we're saying that is the price, that is the statistically significant price point. So I want to connect. I interrupted so that I could connect that story to your story of discovering the P1F, and that is, once you release the belief that it was gonna work, you were free to research into what it actually does. And what it does is it reminds us that the power of the previous trend was down. And that has the real power. So the P1 was the first alert It tells us, hey, maybe this is the time that it reverses, but 2/3 of the time it doesn't. And so it's actually an alert to the upcoming collapsing dragon that's going to happen 2/3 of the time, which is the one we want. But it, but when that SSC works, it's always so good that you want to take the trade. So that's why I say I love taking my second favorite pattern, because when it fails, I get my first favorite pattern. But if my second favorite pattern works, it keys me into that whole series of rising kata 2s, which can be 6 or 7 iterations of my third favorite pattern, which is actually now my second favorite pattern. And the SSC is simply just get in, for crying out loud. Get skin in the game and manage the damn trade under pressure.